I froze in the doorway, my son's jacket still clutched in my shaking hands. My boy was home, after 2 weeks missing, but thinner, quieter, with eyes that didn't quite look like his anymore. The house was silent, except for the rain and the sound I couldn't explain. A breath. Slow, shallow, coming from under his bed. I had begged for this moment, for my child to walk through the door again. But as I knelt down and reached for the sound, I realized something that made my blood run cold. My son hadn't come home alone. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Rain hammers Rachel's windshield as she speeds to the police station. I couldn't see the road. Just streaks of red tail lights smeared against the glass, wipers screaming across the windshield like they were trying to erase the night itself. I had one hand locked tight around the steering wheel, the other gripping my phone like it might vanish. 2 weeks. That's what the voice on the other end of the call had said. 2 weeks. And no one had heard from Ethan. He was supposed to help me move on the 23rd, his friend James said, voice tight with unease. That was the last time I even got a read receipt. The 23rd. I had texted Ethan that night too. I never got an answer. I told myself it was normal. I let David tell me it was normal. He just needs space, Rach. Let him figure things out. I pressed harder on the gas. The tires groaned as I turned into the parking lot of the 4th District Police Precinct. The whole building washed in the blue haze of stormlight. I barely remembered putting the car in park. Inside, the air was dry and still, too warm against my soaked clothes. A young officer led me past a wall of empty chairs and desks cluttered with papers to an office at the end of the hall. The nameplate read, Detective R. Wells. He stood when I entered, offered a practiced smile. Mrs. Marino, I'm Detective Wells. Have a seat. His desk was a mess, folders stacked like mini skyscrapers, a laptop open with 2 tabs flashing. He pulled a thin file from the top of the pile and opened it. I saw Ethan's name printed neatly across the top. He was last seen, Wells began, flipping through the pages, leaving a privately rented storage unit off Pier 14. Surveillance caught him at 7:18 p.m. No one's reported seeing him since. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt like sandpaper. My husband, David, thinks Ethan's just doing what kids his age do, going off the grid. I met Wells's eyes, but I know my son. He always checks in. Wells nodded. Has Ethan ever gone missing before? No, I said immediately. Not like this. He scribbled something down, but I caught the way his expression shifted. A flicker of something. Doubt, maybe. We'll open a missing persons case, he said carefully. We'll start by canvassing the docks, checking traffic cameras. You'll need to file an official statement. His voice was calm, procedural, but under it I could feel the weight pressing in. The quiet reluctance, like something unspoken was already working against me. David. His name hung in the silence between us. I filed the statement. Gave them every number, every message, every half-fight and voicemail and moment I could remember. And then I walked back into the rain. The drive home was a blur. Somewhere between the freeway exit and the empty driveway, I realized my hands were still trembling. Inside, the house felt like a museum. Every light was off. The thermostat still set to 68, just how David liked it. I kicked off my wet shoes and wandered into Ethan's room. It still smelled like him. Cologne, cedar, faint traces of the deodorant he always borrowed from David. I sat on his bed, opened my phone, scrolled back to our last text exchange. My stomach twisted when I saw it. Ethan, April 23rd, 7:26 p.m. Don't trust him. That was it. No follow-up, no name, just those 3 words. The floor creaked in the hallway. I jerked my head up, but no one was there. The house was still. I got up slowly, heart thudding, walked to the window. Outside, the lightning flashed again, igniting the yard for a single blinding second. I saw nothing but trees, wet grass, shadows. I pressed my fingers to the glass. My voice barely made it out. Who? The light in the hallway flickered once, then settled. I turned from the window, my breath still shaky, and made my way downstairs. David's study door was open, warm lamplight spilling into the hallway like a soft warning. He was there, like always, in his leather chair, back perfectly straight, scrolling through his phone as if none of this touched him. He didn't even look up when I stopped in the doorway, still damp from the rain. You're just sitting here? I asked, my voice small but edged with something sharper underneath. He glanced at me over the rim of his glasses, calm, almost amused. Why wouldn't I be? I stepped inside, heart racing faster than my feet could carry me. 2 weeks, David? He's been missing for 2 weeks. And you didn't even file a report? He set his phone down, slowly. Rach, we've been over this. Ethan does this kind of thing. He's impulsive, emotional. He'll surface when he wants something. Don't, I snapped, louder now. Don't act like this is just one of his moods. He didn't just vanish. Something's wrong. David leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach like a man who's won the argument before it started. You're spiraling. Again. You always do this when he pushes away. I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. The storm, the detective, the file with Ethan's name in it. And then I saw it. On the far corner of his desk, half tucked under a folder, was a sealed envelope. White. Thick. My breath caught when I saw the writing across the front. Ethan's handwriting. All at once, the room shrank around me. I stepped forward without thinking, reaching for it. Don't touch that. His voice cut through the air like a blade. Sharp. Unmistakable. I froze. His chair creaked as he sat forward, suddenly less calm. Less anything. There was something in his eyes I didn't recognize. Something colder than his usual indifference. What is that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's private, he said simply, and it has nothing to do with you. My hand hovered above the envelope. My body told me not to push, but something else, something maternal, or maybe just terrified, screamed that I had to. It has Ethan's name on it. David stood. Not fast, not aggressive, just with the kind of quiet control that made your skin crawl. I said, he repeated, don't touch it. For a second, we stared at each other, like strangers who'd met too late in the story to make sense of each other. Then I stepped back, slowly. Did he give that to you? I asked. David didn't answer. He picked up his phone again and turned away, as if the conversation, the entire situation, no longer concerned him. I stood there another moment, long enough to let the fear take root, long enough to know that something had cracked between us, and I didn't know if it could ever be patched over. That night, I lay in Ethan's bed again. The rain had stopped, but the house still groaned under the weight of storm-soaked air. I kept seeing that envelope, his handwriting, the way David's voice changed when I got close to it. I told myself I'd imagined it, that it was just a letter, something benign, maybe a graduation card, a private apology. But deep down, I knew better. I curled tighter under Ethan's blanket, the scent of him still clinging to the threads, and whispered the same 3 words I'd been holding in my chest since the police station. Don't trust him. The knock came just after 8. Not on the door, on my phone. A text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Pick up. Seconds later, the phone rang. Detective Wells. We found Ethan's car, he said, skipping the pleasantries. It was abandoned off County 18, about a quarter mile from a cabin registered to your family's name. My parents' old place? I asked, sitting upright. Looks that way. You familiar with it? Yes, I said, already grabbing my keys. I'll meet you there. But he paused. We haven't made entry yet. Waiting on a warrant. Chain of evidence. That kind of thing. I understand. I hung up before he could stop me. The drive took less than an hour, though it felt longer, winding through thick fog and a forest that hadn't been cleared in years. Gravel crunched under my tires like bones. The cabin appeared out of the mist like something out of memory, nestled beneath towering pine and silent sky. Ethan's car sat off the main path, canted slightly in the weeds. No visible damage, but the passenger door was ajar. That alone was wrong. Ethan was meticulous about locking things. I stepped out slowly, heart pounding in my throat. I hadn't been here in over a decade, not since my father passed. The front porch sagged slightly, just as I remembered. The windows still had those old storm shutters, now splintered and gray. I didn't expect to find the door unlocked, but it was. Inside, the air was thick. Not dusty, just heavy. Like someone had exhaled and never left. Most of the cabin looked untouched. The plaid couch, the fireplace, the bookshelf missing a few paperbacks. But it was the floor that stopped me. Muddy footprints. Fresh. Leading from the entryway toward the back bedroom. I followed them, breath shallow, and stopped at the open doorway. The room was dim, light barely pushing through the drawn curtains. Then I saw it. Ethan's jacket. Draped over the edge of the bed like it had just slipped from someone's shoulders. I crossed the room, picked it up. It smelled like sweat and cedar and something I couldn't place. Panic, maybe. Something else glinted on the floor beneath the bed. I crouched. A phone battery. No phone. Just the back panel and a battery, cracked at the corner. And next to it, nearly hidden beneath the edge of the bed frame, a business card. David Marino, Strategic Risk Management. I stared at it, my vision tunneling. That simple white rectangle felt heavier than anything I'd lifted in my life. I stood slowly, one hand pressed to my chest. It didn't make sense. Why would David have been here? Why would Ethan's jacket, his phone, his absence all lead back to this forgotten place, and back to my husband? Unless Ethan had come here to meet him, or hide from him. Panic spiked hard, chasing closely behind with rage. I took out my phone, snapped 3 quick photos, the jacket, the battery, the business card. Then I opened a new message thread and typed one line. Me. Explain this. I hit send before I could second guess it. I barely had time to breathe before the typing dots appeared. Then his reply came in, fast and cold. David, you shouldn't have gone there. I stared at those 6 words, a chill seeping up from the floorboards and rooting in my spine. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't say what the cabin was. He didn't ask if I was okay. He already knew exactly where I was, and exactly what I'd found. Rachel's daughter Sophie notices her mother's shaking hands. By the time I got home, the sun was rising, though it didn't feel like morning. The light outside was a dull smear across the horizon, barely bright enough to chase shadows off the street. I parked in the driveway but didn't move. Just sat there, gripping the steering wheel with numb fingers, the photo of David's business card still glowing faintly on my phone screen. "You shouldn't have gone there." That reply kept looping through my mind like a trap door swinging shut. Inside, the house was still. Too still. Then, movement. Sophie. She stood in the kitchen, wrapped in a hoodie and holding a half-empty mug of tea. Her eyes were puffy, hair tangled. She looked small and older all at once. I hadn't even realized it was a school day. "Mom?" she asked, blinking. "You've been gone all night." I tried to speak, but the words were slow coming. "I needed air." She stared at me. "You look pale." I moved past her, set my bag on the counter. My hands were trembling. I hadn't noticed until I reached for the fridge. The orange juice slipped and landed hard, splashing against the tile. Sophie rushed forward, paper towels in hand. I crouched to clean it, but she caught my wrist gently. "Mom," she said, voice lower now. "You're shaking." I looked at her, really looked at her. 15 going on 30. Eyes like Ethan's, dark, searching. Her lip trembled just a little. "You think Dad's involved?" she said, barely asking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just knelt there, hands sticky with juice and guilt, and watched the paper towels soak through. "I don't know what I think," I whispered finally, "but something's not right." She sat beside me on the floor. We didn't speak for a while. The quiet between us felt safer than anything words could build. Then my phone rang. I jumped, fumbled for it. Unknown number. "Sophie, go upstairs," I said quickly, standing. "Mom, please." She obeyed, but slowly, watching, waiting. I answered the call. "Hello?" There was static, a high-pitched crackling like wind dragging across a wire. Then, "Mom?" The voice was weak, shaky, but I knew it. I knew it. "Ethan?" I gasped. "Baby, where are you? Are you okay?" More static, the sound of rustling, breathing, something brushing the mic. "Mom." His voice again, barely audible. "I didn't—" "What? You didn't what?" I clutched the phone tighter. My heart was racing. My knees felt like they could fold at any second. "Where are you? I'll come get you. Just tell me." Then, silence. "Ethan?" Nothing. The call dropped. No number. No call log. Just blank air. I stood frozen, staring at the screen. He was alive. He was alive. But his voice, the strain in it, it wasn't just exhaustion. It was fear. Like someone had let him call me for a second, and then yanked the cord back. "Ethan," I whispered again. But the room was empty. My legs buckled. I dropped to the floor, palms pressed hard to the tile like I could anchor myself to the earth. I'd been holding my breath since the cabin. Now it let go all at once in gasps. Sophie appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "Was that him?" I couldn't lie. I nodded. Her hand covered her mouth. "He's alive?" I nodded again, tears finally finding their way through. "But he's close," I said, more to myself than her. I could feel it in his voice. And somewhere in the walls, the house creaked, like it knew something too. 2 days later, the doorbell rings. Ethan stands there, gaunt and trembling. For 2 days, I barely slept. I lived between the couch and my phone, eyes fixed on the screen, waiting for another call that never came. The police promised updates. None came. Detective Wells stopped answering after the second voicemail. Even Sophie began avoiding the kitchen, whispering on the phone to friends who didn't know how to comfort her. By the second night, the world had thinned to a hum. Refrigerator, Rain against the window, the slow pulse in my ears. Then came the doorbell. One sharp, ordinary chime that split the quiet in two. Sophie shouted from upstairs, "I'll get it." But I was already moving, heart climbing into my throat. When I opened the door, I forgot how to breathe. Ethan stood there. My son. His face was ghost pale, thinner than I'd ever seen it. His hair matted, a dark bruise under his right eye. His clothes, old jeans, a torn sweatshirt, looked like they had been worn for days. For a second, neither of us spoke. Rain dripped from his hood, tiny rivers trailing down to his sneakers. Then I stepped forward and pulled him in. "Oh my God, Ethan!" My voice broke in half. I gripped his shoulders, felt how small he'd become, how light. "Where were you? What happened?" He shook his head. "You can't ask me. Not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" But his eyes, those same dark, restless eyes I'd seen in Sophie just 2 days earlier, darted toward the window behind me. He stepped inside, pulling the door shut with quick precision. The move startled me. It was almost military. He scanned the hallway, the staircase, the front window. Every sound seemed to make him flinch. "Ethan," I whispered, "what's going on? Are you hurt? Do we need to go to the hospital?" "No hospitals," he said too fast. His hands were trembling. "Please, Mom, just let me stay here tonight. Don't tell anyone I'm back." The storm outside thickened. Thunder rolling in the distance. Sophie came halfway down the stairs and froze. Her breath caught audibly. "Ethan?" He turned. For a flicker, something close to relief crossed his face. "Hey, kiddo." Then he smiled, but it wasn't the smile I remembered. It was faint, cautious, as though it hurt to hold. Sophie ran to him, but even she hesitated before wrapping her arms around him. He barely lifted his in return. "Where have you been?" she asked softly. He just shook his head again. "Later." We fed him soup he barely touched. His eyes stayed fixed on the window, on the reflection of the house behind the glass. When he finally went upstairs to rest, I sat in the living room, staring at the untouched bowl. Something was off. More than exhaustion. More than trauma. He kept checking his phone, which had no battery, no SIM card. When I asked why, he said, "Habit." I tried calling Detective Wells, but stopped before hitting send. Ethan's voice echoed in my head. "Don't tell anyone." That night, the air felt heavy again. Every creak of the house seemed amplified. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a noise I couldn't name, muffled, rhythmic, coming from down the hall. Ethan's room. I walked quietly, barefoot, careful not to wake Sophie. The door was cracked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit by the streetlight filtering through blinds. Ethan was in bed, facing the wall, breathing shallowly. But the sound wasn't him. It was lower, softer, irregular. I stepped closer, each breath sharp in my throat. The noise was coming from the floor, from under the bed. I crouched, the wood cold against my knees. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, as my eyes adjusted, something shifted. A duffel bag. It moved. A low exhale came from inside it. Wet, human, unmistakable. My hand flew to my mouth. Someone was in there. Rachel rips open the bag. A teenage boy, gagged and terrified, stares back. My hand hovered over the zipper. The duffel bag shifted again, a low rustle like skin against nylon. Another breath. Shallow. Panicked. I didn't have time to think. I yanked the zipper open. Inside, curled tight like a wounded animal, was a boy. He looked maybe 16, maybe younger. Rail thin, shaking, his wrists zip-tied in front of him. His mouth was gagged with a strip of torn fabric, eyes wild and rimmed red, like he hadn't slept in days. For a full second, neither of us moved, just locked in this horrifying stillness. Then his body jerked like he expected to be hit. I stumbled back. "Ethan!" I hissed, louder than I meant to. "Ethan, get in here!" He was already at the door. When he saw me kneeling by the bag, eyes wide, the color drained from his face. "Don't touch him," Ethan said, voice sharp. "Please, don't freak out. He's not the enemy." I stared at my son, heart pounding. "He's in a bag, Ethan, bound and gagged, in your room." "I had to," Ethan snapped. It was the only way to keep him safe. I looked back at the boy, who flinched every time Ethan spoke. I moved slowly now, pulling the gag free, then the ties. He gasped, hard, gulping like air hurt. "Please, please." I didn't do anything. "It's okay," I whispered. "No one's going to hurt you." But even I didn't believe it anymore. Ethan stepped closer, palms out. "His name's Jordan. He's not a threat." The boy, Jordan, looked up at him, nodding, still trembling, still crouched like he might be thrown back in. "He saved me," Jordan whispered. "Your son. He saved me." My mind couldn't hold the shape of this. I turned to Ethan, unable to breathe right. "Saved you. From what? From who?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room. It was supposed to be clean. No witnesses. But Jordan, he saw it happen. Saw what happened? My voice broke on the last word. Ethan stopped moving. His back was to me, shoulders tight. "Ethan," I said again, firmer this time. "You said he's a witness." "A witness to what?" He finally turned, and for the first time since he came home, he looked me straight in the eye. "To what Dad did." Everything in me stilled. "What did your father do, Ethan?" I already knew I wouldn't be able to handle the answer. But the question still came out, steady as steel. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, hands on his knees, breathing like the words might choke him. Then he said it. "He killed someone." My throat tightened. "Who?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know his name. He worked with Dad. A paralegal or maybe an investigator. Someone who had access to something. Something bad. Something that could destroy everything." I took a step back. "Destroy what?" "Dad's whole operation. His firm. Maybe more." I tried to sit, missed the edge of the desk chair, and ended up sinking to the floor. "Are you telling me your father murdered someone to cover up a lawsuit?" Ethan's eyes dropped. "To cover up the truth. And Jordan, he saw it. He was in the wrong place. Dad didn't know he existed until I found him." "And what?" I said. "You stuffed him in a duffel bag like a body to protect him?" "Because if I didn't," Ethan said quietly, "Dad would have found him first." Jordan was curled against the far wall now, knees pulled tight to his chest, watching the two of us like we were his only hope, or his next threat. The room felt too small, too loud, and suddenly I knew we weren't safe here. Not with Ethan, not with David, not even from the truth. I stood up slowly, grabbed my phone off the dresser, and said the one thing I never thought I'd say again. "We're leaving." Ethan explains. "Daniel and his partner Claire framed an innocent man for a client's crime. We left the house before sunrise. I packed nothing but water, granola bars, a charger, and Jordan's, Liam's, backpack, which I only now saw was monogrammed faintly on the strap. We didn't speak in full sentences, just glances, nods, movement. Like speaking too much would crack the thin shell holding us together. I drove. Ethan sat in the back next to Liam, whose color was just barely returning. The kid leaned against the door, face pale in the morning light, eyes flicking at every passing car like a hunted animal. We pulled into an abandoned rest stop off the highway. One of those cinder block buildings with no doors left, and graffiti from 3 counties sprayed across every surface. Inside the shell of a bathroom, I turned to Ethan. "Talk," I said. "Everything. Start to finish. No more secrets." Ethan nodded. He looked tired. Older. Dad and Claire, his law partner, they've been cleaning up messes for years. For clients. Corporate clients, pharmaceutical, real estate, private security. They do the legal work, and sometimes the illegal work that keeps the clients out of prison. "You said someone died," I said. "Who?" He hesitated. "A man named Ray Torres. He was a logistics manager for a shipping company that Claire's client was using for under-the-table medical shipments." "What kind of medical shipments?" "Unapproved narcotics, sent to rehab facilities to test response profiles before FDA trials. Experimental stuff. Cheap. Dangerous." My hands clenched around the steering wheel. "And Ray found out?" "He threatened to go to the press. Or worse, sue. Dad was handling the settlement privately, but when the numbers got too high, Claire told him Ray was too risky to keep alive." My skin went cold. "So they didn't do it themselves. They used one of the firm's clients, a guy with a private security firm out of Miami. He handled Ray, made it look like a robbery." "And Liam?" I asked, glancing at the kid. Liam spoke for himself this time. His voice was hoarse, raw. "I was there." "Why?" I asked gently. "My cousin was dating Ray. I was picking her up from the job site. I saw everything from the car. They didn't know I was there. But I saw the guy who did it. And I saw your husband show up 10 minutes later." Ethan picked it up from there. "Liam didn't go to the cops. He came to me, through a friend from school. He didn't know what to do. He just knew the guy he saw in the photos from the firm website was my dad. I could barely feel my legs. The air smelled like bleach and mildew and mold, but all I could smell was the rot of the truth." "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked Ethan, voice cracking. "I tried. That night I texted you, but Dad saw my call log. Saw a number he didn't recognize. Next morning he told me to lay low. He said people were watching him, and I was being used." Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor. That's when I knew he knew. About Liam. About the whole thing. I sat down hard on the stone sink ledge, feeling like the floor was shifting beneath me. "You didn't run to protect yourself." Ethan looked up. "No, I ran to protect him." He nodded toward Liam. The weight of it was unbearable. All the nights I let David talk over me. All the years I let him define Ethan as emotional, too reactive, unstable. And the whole time, he'd been trying to do the right thing. My phone buzzed. Detective Wells. I stepped away and answered. "Mrs. Marino," he said, voice clipped. "I thought you'd want to know. We've uncovered financial activity linking your husband's firm to offshore accounts used by a known narcotics trafficker. The paper trail's thin, but it's there. We'll need to bring you in for a formal statement soon." I ended the call without responding. When I turned back, Ethan was watching me carefully. I gave him a small nod. Not just of understanding, of allegiance. I whispered it more to myself than them. "Then we protect him now." Daniel arrives unexpectedly, charm masking menace. We weren't even back 20 minutes when the doorbell rang again. I was in the kitchen, rinsing off Liam's backpack, trying to scrub out the panic from earlier. Ethan was upstairs with Sophie, walking her through just enough of the story so she wouldn't panic. But not enough to ruin her. Then came the bell. Not a knock. A ring. I froze, hands dripping into the sink. Ethan appeared in the hallway, his eyes immediately locking onto mine. "That's him," he mouthed. I didn't ask how he knew. He just knew. I pulled myself together and walked slowly to the front door, pressed my hands against my jeans to dry them, steeled my voice, then opened it. David stood there. Perfect suit, rain-dark overcoat, not a hair out of place, a fresh shave, and that same impossible calm he always wore, the kind that made judges lean in and opposing counsel bite their tongues. "Morning," he said smoothly. "Didn't expect to catch you at home." I blinked, steady. Why wouldn't I be? He smiled. "You've been a little hard to reach. Just checking in." His eyes scanned the interior, casual but precise. They flicked past me, to the staircase, to the living room, to the hardwood floors, still damp from our rushed exit earlier. I didn't move. "Can I help you with something?" He tilted his head. "Is Ethan home?" I let the pause hang just long enough to make it seem like a casual lie. "No." His gaze lingered on mine. Then Sophie called from upstairs too brightly. "Mom, can you help me find my charger?" David's eyes lifted slightly, calculating. I turned my head and called back. "1 second, sweetie." "Everything okay?" he asked, still smiling. "You look tired." I matched his tone. "Long week." "Right," he said, then stepped forward, just enough to make me back up a half inch. "I brought some documents. Wanted to go over next steps if Ethan does decide to talk." My heart thudded. He has nothing to talk about. "Everyone has something," he said softly. Before I could respond, Sophie came bounding down the stairs. Bless her, phone in hand, eyes wide like she hadn't been crying 2 nights ago on the kitchen floor. She wrapped an arm through David's. "Hey, Dad, you want coffee?" He smiled at her, softening. "Maybe just a glass of water. I won't stay long." While he stepped toward the kitchen, I moved fast. I mouthed to Sophie, "Basement." She didn't blink, just nodded slightly and headed toward the back of the house, where the narrow door to the cellar stood half concealed behind an old cabinet. Liam was already crouched under the stairs, hidden in the crawl space. Ethan had dragged down a sleeping bag and a flashlight. It wasn't safe, but it was better than upstairs, better than being seen. Back in the kitchen, David stood with a glass of water in one hand, looking down at the floor. "You've been out in the rain?" he asked lightly. "What makes you say that?" He pointed to the faint, muddy streaks across the entryway tile. "Boot prints. Fresh." "Delivery guy," I lied. "He left the food by the porch. I ran out to grab it." David nodded, but something behind his eyes flickered. He set the glass down, stepped toward me, and kissed my cheek. Too slow, too soft, too cold. Then he whispered just low enough for only me to hear. "Call me when he's ready to talk." He turned and walked out. I didn't breathe until his car pulled away from the curb. Only then did I exhale, and it came out ragged, uneven. Sophie peeked out from the basement door. "Is he gone?" I nodded. Ethan appeared behind her. "He knows," I said quietly. "How much?" Ethan asked. I shook my head. "More than he should. Less than he wants us to think." We stood there for a moment, the 3 of us, and in my gut, I felt it settle. Daniel wasn't just suspicious. He was hunting. Detective Wells betrays their trust. Daniel bought him off. The first sign came just after dawn, the low hum of engines outside. I'd barely slept. The house felt like a live wire. Every window shade was drawn, every sound a threat. Ethan and Liam were in the basement, whispering plans, while Sophie sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through local news updates that all said the same thing. Daniel Marino, respected attorney, cooperates with investigation into firm's financial irregularities. Cooperates. The word twisted in my gut. Then came the knock. 3 sharp official raps that vibrated through the wood. Ethan froze halfway up the stairs. "Mom?" "Stay there," I said. "Don't move." I opened the door and saw the badge before the face. Detective Wells. Only something about him was different. The crisp suit, the expensive watch, the way he avoided meeting my eyes. "Mrs. Marino," he said, tone clipped and professional. "We have a warrant to search your property." My heart stuttered. "For what?" He held up a folded document. "We received a tip that Ethan Marino is harboring a missing juvenile, possibly against his will." I laughed. A short, breathless sound that wasn't laughter at all. "You mean Liam? He's not missing. He's—" "Please step aside," Wells interrupted, motioning to the 2 uniformed officers behind him. "We don't want this to escalate." Behind me, Sophie appeared in the hall. "Mom, what's happening?" "Go upstairs," I whispered. "Now." Wells's eyes tracked her, and I caught the faintest flicker of unease. Or guilt. Hard to tell. "Detective," I said, lowering my voice. "You know my husband's pulling your strings. You know what this is." He didn't answer. He just signaled the officers forward. That's when I ran. "Ethan!" I hissed, sprinting down the hallway. "Upstairs! Both of you, now!" They didn't ask why. I heard footsteps pounding up the staircase, floorboards creaking under their weight. Sophie darted ahead, pulling down the attic ladder from the ceiling hatch. Liam climbed first, pale but quick. Ethan right behind him. I shoved the ladder back up just as Wells and his officers entered the living room. "Mrs. Marino, I need you to stay where you are." I stood with my back to the wall, chest heaving. "You're protecting a killer." Wells sighed, that tired, bureaucratic sigh meant to disguise fear. "This isn't what you think." But it was. The truth was written all over his face. Behind him, the front door swung wider, and I saw him. Daniel. Standing at the curb beside his black sedan, coat collar turned up, talking softly into his phone, watching. The same slight smile he wore in court, the one that said, "Checkmate." "Don't do this, Wells," I said. "Don't let him own you." He didn't answer. One of the uniforms grabbed my wrist, snapping the cuff tight. Metal bit into my skin. Sophie screamed, "Stop!" "She didn't do anything." I twisted against the officer's hold. "Ethan and that boy. They're witnesses. Daniel had a man killed. You're helping bury it." Wells finally looked at me then, just for a second, and I saw it. Shame. A flicker. Then it vanished. "Mrs. Marino," he said quietly, "you need to come with us." The cuffs clicked tighter. My pulse roared in my ears. I turned my head just as they pulled me toward the door. Daniel was leaning against his car, calm as a photograph. He met my gaze, gave the smallest nod. Not of greeting, but of possession. "You'll regret this," I shouted, struggling against the grip on my arm. "You're protecting a murderer." No one answered. As they pushed me into the back of the cruiser, I caught one last glimpse of Sophie through the upstairs window. Her face white with terror, hand pressed to the glass. Our eyes met. I mouthed, "Find them." Then the car door slammed, sealing the sound out, the last sound of my house, my children, my fragile illusion of control. As the siren started and the world blurred past the glass, I realized it wasn't just Daniel's money that bought my silence. It was his reach. For the first time, I wasn't scared of him hurting me. I was scared he wouldn't need to. Sophie sneaks back home after dark. The street was empty when she got there. No cruisers, no reporters, just the hollow quiet of a house no one trusted anymore. Sophie crouched behind the neighbor's hedge, hoodie pulled tight over her head. Her phone was off. Liam had warned her. The second she turned it on, they'd track it. She'd waited until after sunset, pacing circles around the community center where she and Ethan had stashed Liam after the raid. Rachel's whisper, "Find them," still echoed in her chest. Now she was back. She crossed the yard fast and quiet, ducking past the broken motion sensor and slipping through the side gate. The back door was still ajar, a piece of tape wedging the lock. Ethan's trick from when he used to sneak out. Inside, the house smelled like metal and dust. Police had ransacked it, drawers flung open, couch cushions tossed, cabinet doors hanging off hinges. She made her way to the attic ladder. "Ethan?" she whispered. "Liam?" A soft shuffle above her. Then Ethan's voice, tight. "Sophie?" She pulled down the ladder, stepping back as he climbed down fast, pale and damp with sweat. Liam followed, blinking like he hadn't seen daylight in years. "Are you okay?" she asked. "They didn't come back?" "They knocked once," Ethan said. "Didn't come in. We didn't make a sound." Liam looked like he wanted to disappear. "Your dad, he won't stop." "No," Sophie said. "But we can." They moved quickly now, Ethan keeping watch from the front window as Sophie darted into the home office, Rachel's laptop still sitting beneath a stack of folders. She powered it up, heart hammering. "Mom said there's proof," Sophie muttered. "She wouldn't have let them take her unless she knew there was something." The desktop blinked awake. Files filled the screen. Legal templates, invoices, archived email folders. Then she saw it. Client 9, Winthrop case. She opened the folder. Inside, a string of video thumbnails and 3 audio files, each dated and time-stamped. She clicked the first one, crackling audio. Then, Claire's voice. "The plaintiff has records. The safe route is buyout." Daniel. "Safe is slow. I want permanent." Sophie covered her mouth. She clicked the second one. Daniel again. "He can't take the stand. Make sure no one can ever trace it back." She looked at Ethan. His jaw tightened, eyes hardening. "Is it enough?" she asked. "Enough to burn him to the ground." Sophie pulled a flash drive from her pocket, one of Rachel's old encrypted keys, plugged it in, copied everything. Then, just in case, she uploaded the files to a new anonymous Proton Drive account and pasted the link into an email. To Lydia Hale. Subject: Daniel Marino. Listen before you delete body. Proof attached. This story is real. Rachel Marino is being silenced. Do something before someone else disappears. She hit send, then deleted the browser history, the cookies, and ejected the drive, shoved it into her sock. "Come on," she whispered. "Let's go." Then, sirens, not loud, not coming from the main road, but pulsing, slowly, from the alley behind the house. Ethan moved to the window and stiffened. 2 black SUVs, no markings, no flashing lights. Just headlights cutting across the driveway like blades. "They're back," he said. Liam panicked, backing toward the kitchen. "I'm not going with them. I won't." "No one's going anywhere," Sophie snapped. "We're not giving up now." She pulled them both toward the back exit, the old cellar door Ethan had used once to sneak into prom after curfew. "We're going to make it," she said, but her voice trembled, not from fear, from resolve. The woods were darker than Sophie remembered. Branches clawed at her hoodie, roots twisted underfoot. The trail behind their house, Once a childhood escape route for skipping Sunday Mass, now felt like something out of a war film. She could hear Liam's breath hitching behind her, too fast and too loud. Ethan kept glancing back every few seconds, scanning for movement. No one spoke. There wasn't time. They ducked beneath a tangle of branches and dropped low behind a fallen log, a half-collapsed tree trunk Sophie had once tried to build a fort inside when she was 9. Now it was a barricade. In the distance, voices. One clipped, calm, professional. Wells. The other? Smooth, steady, impossible to mistake. Daniel. "Do you see them?" came Daniel's voice, drifting through the trees like smoke. "No," Wells replied, walking closer. "They couldn't have gotten far. She's a teenager, not a Navy SEAL." "She's mine," Daniel said softly. "You underestimate how much she's learned." Sophie pressed a hand over Liam's mouth, eyes locked with Ethan's. His expression was unreadable. Not panic, not yet, but something colder. Then came Ethan's whisper, almost soundless. "If he finds us, he'll kill us." It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a fear. It was knowledge. Sophie nodded once, tightening her grip on Liam's sleeve. The wind shifted. The voices faded. The footsteps moved east. Away from them, for now. "We wait 5 minutes," Ethan mouthed. "Then North Trail." Sophie nodded again, heart pounding like it was trying to outrun her. Elsewhere, beneath fluorescent light and the metallic hum of a holding cell, I sat on the cold bench and stared at my reflection in the tiny pane of security glass. There wasn't much left of me in it. One phone call. That's what they gave me. I could have called a lawyer, the press, my sister. But I called Claire. The line rang twice, then. "This is Claire." "It's Rachel." My voice was rough, lips cracked from hours without water. "I know you're listening, so don't hang up." A beat of silence. "How did you get this number?" "Detective Wells may have sold his soul, but your assistant didn't wipe your call logs from the deposition request file. I traced the last burner number. It's not that hard if you know what you're looking for." Another pause. "You sound exhausted," Claire said. "I am," I replied. "And I'm also done pretending you don't know exactly what Daniel's been doing." A sharp breath. "Careful." "No," I said flatly. "You be careful, because I know he didn't pull this off alone. And if this goes to trial, he's not taking the fall alone either. But if it doesn't go to trial and he ties off the loose ends, tell me, Claire, how many times have you seen him clean house?" Still nothing. "You think he won't come for you?" I asked. "You think once Ethan and I are gone, he'll let you keep your half of the firm? Your name on the sign?" Another silence. This one different. Not angry. Not defensive. Just calculating. Then Claire's voice came through, quieter. "What do you want?" "Bank records," I said. "The offshore accounts. The ones you keep for leverage. You leak them, you tip the scales. My daughter just sent hard evidence to a reporter. If your transfers hit the right hands, Daniel can't wriggle out of this." She hesitated. Then, "Give me 30 minutes." I hung up. Outside the cell, an officer paced like a shark. Inside, I folded my hands together to keep them from shaking. Because it wasn't just a bet. It was my last move. I didn't sleep, but I wasn't tired. They let me out just after dawn. No charges, no apology. The only thing the officer at the front desk said was, "You're free to go, ma'am." His face was blank, but his hands were shaking when he handed me my things. Outside, the air was thick with humidity. Birds chirped like nothing had changed. But I knew better. As I walked past the sliding glass doors of the precinct, The TV in the corner of the lobby flickered with a headline that made me stop cold. Breaking. Prominent attorney Daniel Marino under federal investigation for financial misconduct, obstruction. There was footage, stock images of Daniel at a podium, shaking hands, the firm's logo behind him like a banner of false trust. Then, a reporter, speaking fast. Sources close to the investigation tell us sealed documents, including foreign account transfers and internal audio, were leaked to both the Justice Department and the media late last night. The U.S. Attorney's Office has issued a formal inquiry into Marino and Hale, LLP. I didn't hear the rest. I walked faster. Claire had done it. The files, the leak. She'd made her move. She'd saved herself, sure. But in the process, she'd shifted the ground beneath Daniel's feet. At the corner, a cab slowed. I gave him an address I hadn't said out loud in years. The name of a motel on Route 41 we used to pass on the way to Sophie's orthodontist. 20 minutes later, I knocked once on the door to room 8. It cracked open immediately. Sophie's face appeared in the sliver of light, tired, guarded, and still holding every ounce of courage I'd seen the night I was taken. "Mom," she whispered, and then she threw her arms around me. Inside, the air smelled like old linens and vending machine coffee. Ethan sat on the edge of one of the twin beds, head in his hands. Liam was curled up asleep between 2 extra pillows, his chest rising slow and steady. Ethan looked up when he saw me. His eyes were red, jaw clenched like it hurt to hold anything in. "I'm sorry," he said. "I almost got him killed." I crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped him in my arms. For a second he didn't move. Then he collapsed into me like he was finally allowed. "You brought truth home," I whispered into his hair. "That's what matters now." He cried. Not loud, but deeply. The kind of crying boys aren't allowed to do in front of anyone but their mothers. I looked at Sophie. She didn't say anything, just nodded once. They had saved us, all of us. For a moment, it felt like the nightmare had cracked. Not ended, but shifted. I was with my kids. Liam was safe, and Daniel's name was finally where it belonged, under scrutiny. But then my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I didn't want to answer. I answered. There was no greeting, no threat, just Daniel's voice, smooth as ever, but stripped of pretense. "You ruined me," he said. I closed my eyes. "You ruined yourself." A beat of silence. Then, "Now I'll ruin you." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, phone still in hand, trying to feel strong, but my fingers were trembling. Sophie walked over and gently took the phone from me, setting it on the nightstand. "Let him talk," she said. "We've already seen what he is when he's cornered." But I wasn't thinking about Daniel. Not really. I was thinking about what came next. Because men like him don't fall quietly, and we'd just lit the fuse. The house looked smaller in the dark. Rachel parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, the gravel crunching under her shoes loud enough to feel like a dare. Every window was black. The for sale sign out front leaned crooked, waterlogged from the week's rain. She could see her own reflection faintly in the glass. Older, gaunter, harder. He was inside. She could feel it. She'd recognized his car the moment she turned the corner. That sleek gray Mercedes parked half in shadow, engine still ticking with heat. Daniel always left engines running. He didn't like to feel trapped. Rachel slipped through the side gate, the hinges squealing softly. The smell of damp cedar hit her. Old mulch, decay, the memory of arguments that had started in this backyard and never really ended. Inside, faint light flickered from the hallway, a flashlight beam sweeping side to side. Daniel's voice carried low, muttering to himself. calm, cold. The same cadence he'd used in courtrooms, now applied to trespassing. "Come on," he murmured. "Where did you hide it?" Rachel edged closer, each step deliberate. Her heart didn't pound anymore. It just throbbed. She found him in Ethan's room. The walls were bare now, stripped of posters and furniture, but the smell, detergent, dust, faint teenage cologne, was still there. Daniel was crouched beside the bed, pulling the mattress halfway off the frame. "Always hiding things," he said quietly, almost admiringly. "Even as a kid. Little liar." He ran his fingers along the slats. His flashlight hit something metallic. He froze. Rachel stopped in the doorway, her voice low, even. "That's what you were always afraid of." Daniel spun. The beam hit her square in the eyes, blinding. She didn't flinch. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Court orders still in effect. You're trespassing." "I came for the truth," she said. "Looks like you found it first." He turned back to the bed and peeled away the last strip of tape. There, clinging to the wooden underside, was an envelope. Old, yellowed at the edges. He opened it. Inside, a small flash drive. Rachel's voice softened. "That was Ethan's insurance. He didn't trust me to keep it. Said if anything happened, that's where it stayed." Daniel turned the drive over in his hand, the light glinting off its scratched surface. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. "You leak it, I deny it. You push it, I bury it. Nothing sticks to me, Rachel. Nothing ever has. Until now." He smiled, a small, sharp thing. "You don't have it in you." But something in her eyes made him pause. Rachel stepped forward. "I used to believe that too." Then she reached for the drive. Daniel moved faster. He lunged, catching her wrist, yanking her forward. They collided hard against the bed frame, the metal edge biting into her ribs. She gasped, tried to pull free, but his weight pressed down. Years of intimidation, of calculated control, now distilled into brute force. "Give it to me," he shouted, voice cracking for the first time she'd ever heard. Rachel twisted, grabbing the flashlight, swinging wildly. It hit the wall, bouncing light across his face. Eyes bloodshot, sweat slick on his temple. "You think you're righteous?" he hissed. "You think the truth absolves you? You lived off my sins." She shoved him backward with all she had. He stumbled, hit the corner of the metal bed frame hard. The sound was sharp, final. Daniel fell to the floor, the flashlight rolling away, the beam spinning across the ceiling like a dizzy sun. Rachel stood there, chest heaving, the flash drive clutched in her hand. For a moment she thought he'd rise again, that he'd smirk, make some cutting remark, finish what he started. But he didn't move. His head rested awkwardly against the baseboard. His eyes were open, staring at the slats above where the envelope had been hidden. Rachel sank to her knees, trembling, the drive slick with sweat. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Again. Only this time, they were coming for the right man. The headlines did the work for us. Local attorney dead in suspected domestic assault, self-defense likely. Daniel Marino under federal investigation prior to death. Leaked documents. Tie prominent law firm to homicide, fraud. No one said my name. Not yet. But they would. The reporters were circling, waiting for the right leak, the right moment, the right face to tie to the story. It didn't matter. The truth was out. The video on Ethan's flash drive, grainy but damning, had been verified by 2 outlets and handed to the Justice Department within 12 hours. Claire's bank transfers confirmed everything, down to the date and routing numbers. She took a deal, gave up Daniel's files, the offshore routing keys, the firewall passwords. In exchange, she walked. Not without a scandal, but she walked. Liam, meanwhile, disappeared under a different kind of deal. Witness protection. A new name, a new town, and a phone number I'd never be allowed to have. We hugged once, briefly. He didn't cry, just whispered, "Thank you," and followed the agent through the side door of the courthouse. I don't know where he is now. I hope he eats well. By the end of the week, we were back at the townhouse Rachel's sister had rented for us when everything first fell apart. It smelled like paint and lemon soap and not much else. A blank page. The rain came down steadily that afternoon, soft and unending. Ethan and I sat by the living room window, legs curled under mismatched throws, watching droplets race down the glass. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Sophie was in the kitchen, boiling pasta. The smell of garlic floated faintly through the air, grounding everything. It was the first real food she'd cooked since all of it. We didn't ask her to. She just started moving. "I keep seeing it," Ethan said quietly, eyes still on the window. I turned toward him. "Seeing what?" "The way he looked at you. That night. Like," he swallowed, "like you weren't even human anymore. Just something in the way." I said nothing. Let it settle between us. "He would have killed you," Ethan added, voice low. "If you hadn't stopped him, he would have." I reached for his hand and squeezed. "He already tried," I said. "In smaller ways. For years." Ethan looked over, surprised. Not at the words, but at the fact I said them out loud. "It wasn't one moment," I said. "It was 100. The way he talked over me. Undermined you. Treated Sophie like a prize and me like a problem. Always so composed. That was the trick, wasn't it? You never expect cruelty from someone so calm." Sophie appeared in the doorway, apron smeared with sauce. "It's ready," she said softly. I set the table. We stood and followed her to the kitchen, our movements slow but steady, normal. There were only 3 plates now. I sat between Ethan and Sophie. The TV was off. No phones, just the sound of forks scraping and the occasional quiet clink of a glass. It felt sacred, not because it was perfect, but because it was happening. A meal, together. Ethan reached for the Parmesan and asked, "So, we doing this now? Like dinners and stuff?" Sophie smirked. "You say that like you're not going to be the one who forgets to do dishes." I didn't laugh, but I smiled. "Maybe we just try," I said. "One day at a time." Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, our plates slowly emptied. Grief hadn't left. Fear hadn't vanished. But they were no longer the only ones at the table. Weeks later, movers clear Ethan's old room. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, only hollow. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. Movers murmured to each other in soft voices, careful with their steps like the walls themselves were listening. The townhome had been good to them, given them time to breathe again, but it wasn't meant to last. The lease was up. A new chapter waited somewhere with fewer memories etched into the baseboards. Rachel stood in Ethan's doorway. The room was half-packed now, books in neat piles, posters carefully rolled, bedding stripped away. The mattress leaned against the wall. Dust curled in the corners like cobwebs of old fear. The movers were almost done. Almost. She stepped inside and let her fingers trail the wooden bed frame, now bare. It looked harmless. Just furniture. Just wood and screws and a lifetime of sleep. But to her, it would never be just a bed again. This was where it started. That night. That breath. The exhale from under the bed that had yanked her heart out of her chest. She hadn't imagined it. Hadn't dreamed it. It had been real. That sound. Not just of fear, not just of hiding, but of truth gasping for air. She hadn't known it then. But that was the moment her life split in two, when denial finally cracked and something deeper came clawing into the light. She sat on the edge of the bed frame and let the weight of it settle in her chest. Not grief this time, not quite. Something quieter, heavier. Gratitude, maybe, or clarity. From behind her, footsteps. Ethan stood in the doorway. He was taller now, or maybe she just saw him differently. He didn't speak right away, just looked at the room like it was a ghost. "Feels smaller," he said. Rachel nodded. "It always does, when you're about to leave it." He stepped closer and knelt beside the frame, his hand grazing the underside, almost absently, like he was searching for the envelope that used to be there. "It's strange," he said, voice soft. "Sometimes I think about everything that's happened, and it still feels like it couldn't have been real, like maybe I imagined it, or dreamed it wrong." Rachel didn't answer. He looked up at her. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." She touched his cheek gently, tucking his hair behind his ear like she used to when he was 6 and afraid of thunderstorms. "If I hadn't," she said, "we'd all still be living a lie." Outside the window, sunlight filtered through the clouds, soft, golden, almost forgiving. Rachel rose and moved toward it. She unlocked the latch, pushed the window open wide, and let the air roll in. Fresh, bright, undeniably real. The movers passed behind them, carrying the last of the boxes. One gave Rachel a respectful nod, the kind you give someone whose story you've only heard in whispers. Soon, the room would be empty. Soon, it would belong to someone else. But for now, it still held echoes. And Rachel let herself feel them. The confusion, the silence, the breath beneath the bed. That breath wasn't just a sound, it was something calling out, a warning, a wound, a truth. It was Ethan. It was Liam. It was her. Everything they'd been too afraid to say, too tired to confront, too carefully trained to ignore. All of it had been there, hiding under the frame, waiting for someone to stop pretending. Rachel turned, her silhouette framed in sunlight. She looked at Ethan, the boy who vanished, the boy who came back, the boy who broke the cycle. And as he smiled, just barely, she let herself do the same. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth saving ever was. But it would be theirs. And it would be honest. She stepped out of the room, turning back once. He vanished for 2 weeks. But what I found under that bed brought our whole life into the light.